In one unexpected, heart-stopping moment, as the golden light of early morning filtered through our bedroom curtains, I unwrapped what I thought was the perfect birthday gift, a small, elegantly bound box containing a delicate envelope. Its embossed seal, worn by time and secrecy, whispered promises of romance and intimacy. I had envisioned this gift as a celebration of our love, a final flourish of affection to mark another year of togetherness. But as I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside, my heart pounded with an overwhelming dread. The letter revealed hidden confessions of an affair that would shatter every illusion I had ever held dear. I had planned my wife's birthday meticulously, a day filled with surprises, laughter, and heartfelt moments meant to rekindle the spark in our long, shared journey. 4 years, our marriage had been my safe harbor, a place where I believed our love had grown deep and unassailable. We celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet evenings at home as if we were invincible against the world's trials. Friends would often remark on how perfect we seemed, how our smiles and shared glances spoke of a bond that only grew stronger with time. I trusted her completely, never suspecting that beneath her gentle exterior lay secrets so dark they could undo the very foundation of our life together. It all started innocently enough. I'd chosen a special gift, a beautifully crafted box that I thought would encapsulate our shared memories. I had arranged for it to be delivered on the morning of her birthday, believing it to be the final, perfect surprise to cap off our celebrations. Inside the box, among carefully selected tokens of love, was an envelope that I assumed contained a love note from me. Instead, I found a letter with handwriting that was not my own, a hidden missive written in a delicate, unfamiliar script that immediately sent shivers down my spine. The letter was addressed simply, "To my beloved." I hesitated before reading, a premonition of the heartbreak to come, but curiosity drove me onward. As I unfolded the paper, the words scrawled across it painted a damning picture, a secret romance that had been nurtured in the shadows of our marriage. The letter spoke of stolen moments, whispered promises, and a yearning for passion that I had never known existed between us. Each sentence felt like a betrayal in itself, each phrase a cruel reminder that the woman I loved had been unfaithful. My hands trembled as I read on. The carefully chosen words revealed details too intimate, too raw to be mere fantasy, a confession that someone else's presence had filled the void I thought we shared. It was as if the letter had been meant to be hidden, to be discovered only by someone who dared not question the delicate veneer of our life. Instead, it now lay in my hands, exposing the secrets that had been concealed behind warm smiles and shared dinners. In the following hours, I drifted in a fog of disbelief and anguish. I reread the letter over and over, each time trying to deny the crushing reality that it contained. How could she have done this? I questioned every memory, the late nights when she'd been working late, the whispered phone conversations when I thought she was simply chatting with friends. The evidence in the letter was undeniable, a raw, unfiltered confession that undermined every promise we had ever made to each other. My heart felt as if it had been ripped from my chest, each beat a painful reminder of the love that had been betrayed. That day, as I sat alone in the silence of our home, I began to piece together the fragments of a life that I once believed was unassailable. I examined the envelope seal, the familiar yet unfamiliar handwriting, and even the paper itself, the texture, the faint scent of expensive perfume that lingered on it. Every detail was a clue, a window into a hidden world that I had never known existed. The letter was not just a message, it was a revelation that exposed the secret life my wife had led behind the facade of our perfect union. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a numb daze, my mind reeling as I attempted to reconcile the image of the woman I loved with the betrayal unveiled on that fragile sheet of paper. I couldn't help but recall the evenings when she would smile warmly at me, her eyes filled with what I had assumed was devotion. Now, every gentle gesture was tainted by the possibility of deceit. The room around me, once a sanctuary of shared memories, now seemed to close in, every shadow a reminder of secrets kept and promises broken. The day after I discovered the hidden love letter, my life began to unravel in ways I never could have foreseen. Every familiar sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant chatter of neighbors outside, seemed to echo the painful truth that had been laid bare by that single, unexpected birthday gift. I spent the entire morning locked in a suffocating silence, the love letter's words haunting every thought. I had planned my wife's birthday with such care, a day meant to celebrate our shared memories, the quiet intimacy of years together. Now, the letter that was supposed to be a token of our love had turned into a dagger, exposing a secret so raw and devastating that I felt as if my entire world was collapsing around me. I wandered through our once comforting home like a ghost, every corner now a reminder of a life that was built on illusions. The living room, with its faded photographs of happier times, now mocked me with memories that I could no longer trust. I kept replaying the letter's contents over and over in my mind, the passionate declarations, the secret rendezvous, and the undeniable confession of an affair that shattered the very foundation of my trust. My heart pounded as I wondered how my wife, the woman I had believed in with every fiber of my being, could live such a double life. I was consumed by a mixture of fury, betrayal, and an overwhelming sadness that left me questioning everything I had once held dear. Determined to uncover every hidden layer of this betrayal, I began a meticulous, painful process of investigation. I started by retracing every step that might have led to that shocking revelation. I spent long hours scrutinizing old messages on her phone and cross-referencing bank statements, searching for clues that might explain the discrepancies in her stories. I discovered that the expenses on her credit card, once dismissed as routine purchases, now painted a picture of clandestine meetings at upscale restaurants and secret trips to hotels, places that had no logical explanation within the context of our life. Each new piece of evidence felt like another nail in the coffin of the trust one had once taken for granted. Late one restless afternoon, I found myself staring at the glowing screen of my laptop, where I had painstakingly compiled every scrap of evidence into a digital dossier. The dossier was a bitter mosaic of our life together, the timestamps of her mysterious outings, screenshots of flirtatious messages, and even photos of her at venues I'd never heard her mention. With every scroll, my pulse quickened and my mind spun with the gravity of the betrayal. I recalled the gentle nuances of her behavior that I had ignored, the way she'd tense up when I casually mentioned plans for the weekend, the secretive glances at her phone, and even the slight tremor in her voice when discussing her day. I realized that the perfect marriage I had so confidently believed in was nothing more than a fragile illusion, carefully maintained until one careless moment exposed the truth. In the midst of this painful internal storm, I was forced to confront not only the reality of her infidelity but also the deep, lingering questions about myself. Had I been too complacent? Had I allowed myself to be blinded by the comfort of routine and trust? Each question felt like an accusation against my very soul. I began writing frantically in my journal, pouring out every emotion, every thought, every memory that now felt tainted by deception. I wrote of the hollow promises, the shared laughter that had once filled our home, and the creeping realization that I had been living a lie. The pages of my journal became a confessional where I confronted the painful duality of my existence, the man who once believed in unwavering love and the wounded soul now grappling with betrayal. Days turned into nights in a daze of bitter introspection. I found myself isolated in my own grief, walking through the silent halls of our home as if searching for remnants of the life we once shared. I spent hours in the study, rereading the letter, letting its harsh words sear into my memory. I questioned every piece of evidence and every moment of ignorance. How could I have been so oblivious? How had I not seen the subtle signs that now screamed of deception? The answers, if they existed at all, were buried beneath layers of my own denial and the comforting lies I had chosen to believe. And yet, with every painful realization, a steely resolve began to form, a determination to confront the betrayal and reclaim my dignity. That resolve came crashing into reality on a cold, gray evening. I knew I could no longer live in the silence of my doubts. The moment had arrived when I would face my wife and demand the truth. With my digital dossier clutched tightly in my hand, I waited for the right moment, when the quiet of our home would no longer shield her from the inevitable reckoning. When the time finally came, the confrontation was both a release and a rupture. I found her in our living room, her face illuminated by the soft light of a table lamp, her eyes betraying a hint of unease that I had long tried to ignore. I approached her slowly, each step heavy with the weight of impending truth. "Laura," I said, my voice trembling yet resolute, "we need to talk." I laid the evidence on the coffee table, printed screenshots, annotated timelines, and snippets of the love letter that had been meant to be a surprise but instead became a harbinger of betrayal. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The evidence lay between us like a gaping wound, raw and undeniable. I could see the shock in her eyes, a flicker of panic before she tried to mask it with a feigned smile. My heart pounded as I continued, "I know about the affair. I know you lied about where you were. How could you do this?" My words were measured, though every syllable carried the weight of my shattered trust. Laura's face contorted with a mix of guilt and sorrow. She tried to speak, her voice barely audible at first. I'm sorry," she stuttered, as if the words themselves were insufficient to mend the rift. "It just happened. I didn't know what else to do." Her confession was a jumble of excuses and half-formed regrets, each one failing to bridge the gulf between us. I pressed further, demanding to know how long this had been going on, whether there was any part of our life that was real. But her answers were evasive, mired in tears and a palpable sense of resignation. The confrontation spiraled into a painful, drawn-out exchange of accusations and broken promises. I recalled every moment of innocence that had now been tainted by deceit, every shared dream that now seemed as fragile as shattered glass. The room, once a haven of warmth and intimacy, became a battleground of raw emotions, a place where the truth was laid bare in all its brutal, unvarnished reality. As the night wore on, the silence between us grew heavier. I left the room that night with my heart in tatters, the evidence of her betrayal seared into my memory. The confrontation had shattered not only the illusion of our perfect marriage but had also exposed the deep fractures in our very souls. I knew that from that moment forward, nothing would ever be the same. The woman I had loved was now irrevocably altered, and the path to any kind of healing would be long, arduous, and fraught with painful choices. In the days that followed, I was overwhelmed by a sense of isolation and disbelief. Family gatherings, once a source of joy, now became minefields of hushed whispers and sympathetic glances. Friends and relatives, shocked by the scandal that had erupted, avoided eye contact and offered only distant, pitying words. I withdrew into myself, haunted by memories of a love that had once seemed so unassailable. Every object in our home, a photograph on the mantel, a letter on the desk, even the worn rug in the living room, now bore silent witness to the betrayal that had upended my world. Desperation mingled with the need for clarity, and I found solace in the one thing that had always helped me process my emotions: writing. I poured my heart onto paper, detailing every moment of that harrowing confrontation and every painful realization that followed. Each sentence was a catharsis, a step toward understanding the depths of my own anguish. In those pages, I began to see a path, not one that led back to what we had lost, but one that pointed toward a future where I might rebuild my identity, piece by piece, from the rubble of a shattered trust. Slowly, I reached out to a trusted friend who had always been a pillar of support in my life. Over long, quiet conversations, I recounted the events with a raw honesty that both pained and freed me. His steady presence and empathetic words reminded me that, even in the darkest moments, I was not alone. "You have the strength to rebuild," he told me gently, "and sometimes, the end of one chapter is the painful beginning of another." His words resonated deeply, providing a glimmer of hope that even the most devastating betrayals could eventually give way to a new beginning. In the midst of this turmoil, I began to question everything about the life I had once taken for granted. I analyzed every moment of our past, the laughter, the tender embraces, the promises whispered in the quiet of the night, and I realized that, perhaps, the illusion of perfection had been too fragile to withstand the weight of unspoken truths. I understood that trust, once broken, could never be fully restored to its original form, but it might be rebuilt on a foundation of hard-won wisdom and painful honesty. The journey toward healing was slow and arduous. Each day, I took small, deliberate steps: long walks in the early morning mist, quiet afternoons spent reading and reflecting, and late-night sessions of journaling where I allowed my emotions to spill onto the page. I sought therapy and began to learn that forgiveness, though it might never erase the scars of betrayal, could free me from the relentless grip of anger. I started to see that while the love I once believed in was irrevocably shattered, there was still a chance to forge a new, albeit different, path forward, one defined not by the illusions of the past but by the raw, unfiltered truth of who I am. As time passed, the initial storm of emotions gradually subsided into a heavy, persistent ache, a reminder that the wounds of betrayal might never fully heal, but that I could learn to live with them, to let them become a part of the tapestry of my life rather than its defining theme. I reconnected with friends and family, each encounter a small step toward reclaiming the warmth and authenticity that had been lost in the cold glare of betrayal. I even began to explore new passions, creative pursuits that allowed me to express the tumultuous mix of sorrow and hope that now filled my heart. I attended a support group for those who had experienced profound betrayal, where I listened to stories of loss and eventual redemption. In those meetings, I found that while the pain of betrayal is deeply personal, it is also a shared human experience, and that, perhaps, there is a way to emerge from the darkness with a renewed sense of self. The journey was far from linear, with many setbacks and nights when despair threatened to overwhelm me. But gradually, the pieces of my broken identity began to align, forming a new picture of resilience and quiet determination. Now, as I sit in the soft glow of another early morning, I look out at the rising sun and reflect on the long, winding path that has brought me to this point. I know that the road ahead will be fraught with pain and uncertainty, that the scars of betrayal will remain as a testament to the life I once thought I knew. Yet, I also believe that from these ruins, I have the power to rebuild, to forge a future defined by truth, self-respect, and the quiet strength of forgiveness. The confrontation with Vanessa has left our marriage irreparably changed, and the public exposure of her betrayal has cast a long shadow over my life. But in that same exposure, I have discovered an inner resolve, a determination to redefine who I am, not by the deceit that tore my world apart, but by the courage it took to face it. I have come to understand that while trust may be fragile and easily shattered, it is also a foundation upon which one can rebuild, piece by painstaking piece, into something even more authentic. I stand now at the precipice of a new beginning, with each memory of that fateful night serving as both a wound and a lesson. I choose to honor the truth, however painful it may be, and to use it as the catalyst for a transformation that is uniquely mine. The journey of healing is long and uncertain, but I am resolved to walk it, one step at a time, guided by the hope that even the deepest scars can eventually give way to a life filled with genuine love and unwavering truth. In the cold, piercing light of early dawn, I sat alone with my heart pounding and my mind reeling, a maelstrom of betrayal and shattered trust. Every word from the fake dating profile's messages, every flirty emoji and boastful confession from my wife, replayed in my mind like a relentless, cruel refrain. In that raw moment, I realized that my life, once a tapestry of shared dreams and quiet certainty, had been reduced to splintered memories and bitter regrets. The truth was now undeniable, and the secret I had uncovered would forever redefine me. I knew that facing it was the only way to reclaim my dignity and rebuild a future from the ruins. After that devastating night, the shock of my discovery consumed every aspect of my existence. I had spent the last 24 hours in a daze, reviewing the digital dossier I'd painstakingly compiled from the responses to my fake dating profile, each message a knife twisting deeper into my already fractured heart. The evidence was irrefutable. My wife had not only been unfaithful, but she'd flaunted the affair with a reckless audacity that left no room for denial. I replayed every message over and over, the screen's cold light reflecting the harsh reality that the perfect life I had believed in was nothing more than a fragile illusion. As I struggled to come to terms with the magnitude of the betrayal, I knew that I could not remain a passive observer to my own ruin. I had to confront the truth, and my wife, with a resolve that was as unyielding as it was raw. In the silent hours before dawn, I drafted a plan for the confrontation. I wanted it to be measured, not explosive, a moment when the undeniable evidence would speak for itself, leaving no room for further deception or excuses. I rehearsed my words in the solitude of my study, every sentence carefully weighed against the torrent of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. The confrontation came on a chilly autumn evening. Our home, once a sanctuary of warmth and shared laughter, now felt like a stage set for the final act of a tragedy I never wished to see. I invited her to the living room, a space that had witnessed our happiest moments, and, with my digital dossier spread out before us like a grim testament, I asked the questions that had haunted me for so long. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice a controlled blend of sorrow and determination. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. I watched her face transform, first shock, then a deep, palpable sadness. Each tear that welled in her eyes was a silent admission of guilt, and every quivering breath spoke volumes of the secret she had kept hidden from me. She tried to speak in halting, broken phrases, her words lost amidst sobs and desperate whispers of regret. I pressed on, not with accusations that burned with impulsive fury, but with the cold logic of evidence. "I saw every message," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I know about the conversation in the group chat, the explicit details, everything." With each word, the undeniable truth spilled forth, and in that painful moment, I felt the foundations of our marriage crumble entirely. The room filled with the unspoken weight of our collective history, the laughter of shared memories now tainted by betrayal, the promises we once made reduced to shattered fragments. I realized then that this wasn't just about an extramarital fling, it was about the destruction of everything I had believed in. My heart ached with both anger and an overwhelming sorrow for the life that was lost. I questioned how we had allowed our bond to be so eroded by secrets that, even after years of trust and shared dreams, it could be so easily dismantled. That night, as I left the room, my steps felt heavy and my vision blurred with unshed tears. I wandered through our quiet house like a ghost, each room a painful reminder of the moments we had once shared. Outside, the chill of the night mirrored the cold emptiness inside me. I drove home with a numb resolve, the streetlights streaking past in a blur, as if the world itself was in mourning. Every mile felt like a step further away from the life I once knew and a step closer to an uncertain, painful future. In the following days, I found myself enveloped in isolation. I rarely left the house, choosing instead to immerse myself in the raw, relentless process of reflection. I sat in the study for hours on end, rereading the digital evidence and scribbling fervent notes in my journal. Every line of text was a reminder of the betrayal that had rewritten the story of our marriage. I wrestled with an avalanche of conflicting emotions, bitterness and sorrow, anger and regret, each vying for space in my shattered heart. I even questioned my own role in this unraveling. Had I been so caught up in the comfort of routine that I failed to see the subtle signals of deceit? The answers, if they existed, were buried beneath layers of painful realization. Amid the darkness of my solitude, I also sought solace in therapy. My counselor, a patient soul with quiet wisdom, helped me navigate the labyrinth of my grief. In our sessions, I poured out every painful detail, the discovery of the love letter and the birthday gift, the cascade of messages from my fake dating profile, the crushing confrontation with my wife, and slowly, I began to understand that the path to healing was a long, winding journey. You must allow yourself to feel every ounce of pain, she would say, for in embracing the truth, you take the first step toward rebuilding yourself. Her gentle words, though they did little to ease the rawness of my sorrow, began to plant seeds of resilience in the barren soil of my trust. I started to reconnect with old friends who remembered me not just as a husband, but as an individual with dreams and passions beyond the confines of a troubled marriage. Their quiet support provided a flicker of hope amid the darkness. I returned to hobbies that I had once cherished, taking long walks in the crisp autumn air, reading books that transported me to far-off worlds, and even rediscovering my love for music. These small acts of self-care, though seemingly insignificant, slowly began to stitch together the frayed edges of my identity. In a particularly reflective moment, I visited a local park one brisk afternoon. The vibrant hues of fallen leaves, the gentle murmur of the wind through the trees, and the sound of children laughing in the distance stirred something deep within me. I sat on an old wooden bench and allowed the beauty of that simple moment to wash over me. In that quiet space, I realized that even when the most cherished dreams are shattered, nature reminds us that every ending harbors the seeds of a new beginning. The contrast between the vibrant life around me and the desolation of my broken heart was stark, and in that contrast, I found a small measure of peace. As the days turned into weeks, I began to piece together a vision for a new future. I acknowledged that while the betrayal had irrevocably changed my world, it did not have to define me entirely. I started writing a blog, a raw, honest account of my journey from the devastation of betrayal to the slow, painful process of healing. My words, unfiltered and cathartic, resonated with strangers who had walked similar paths, and their stories gave me strength. In sharing my experience, I discovered a profound sense of solidarity, a reminder that even in the darkest times, the human spirit is capable of resilience. I also made a conscious decision to let go of the need for endless retribution. The digital dossier that once symbolized my quest for truth and a desperate demand for justice gradually transformed in my eyes. It was no longer a weapon to wound further but a record of a painful past from which I could learn. I archived the dossier, a symbolic act of closure, while keeping a few copies for reflection. The act of letting go was not immediate or complete, but it was a crucial step toward freeing myself from the shackles of perpetual anger. One night, as I sat by the window watching the soft glow of the moon over the quiet streets, I wrote in my journal, "Today, I choose to reclaim my life." The scars of betrayal remain, but they are now reminders of my strength, a testament that even when trust is shattered, the capacity to rebuild endures. Those words, simple yet profound, marked a turning point in my journey. I began to see that the end of one chapter did not mean the end of my story. Instead, it was the painful, necessary prelude to a future where I could redefine love, trust, and my own identity. Now, as I prepare to move forward, I do so with cautious optimism. I know the road ahead is uncertain, and the memories of that fateful night will continue to echo in my heart. Yet, I also believe that from the ruins of our broken past, a new life can emerge, one that is forged in the fires of truth and tempered by the resilience of the human spirit. My journey toward healing is ongoing, filled with ups and downs, moments of despair, and fleeting glimpses of hope. Each day, I strive to let the lessons of my pain guide me, to accept that while the betrayal may have shattered the facade of our marriage, it has also given me the strength to rebuild from scratch. I look to the future with a resolve that is both fragile and fierce. I have learned that forgiveness is not about erasing the past, it is about freeing oneself from its suffocating grip. I am determined to build a life defined not by the bitterness of what was lost, but by the possibility of what can still be found. With each new day, I take a step forward into a world that, though forever altered, holds the promise of renewal and hope. This is my rebirth, a transformation born from the crucible of betrayal, a slow emergence from the darkness into the tentative light of a new beginning. Though the memories of that devastating night will always linger, they now serve as symbols of survival, proof that even when the most cherished illusions shatter, there remains within us the capacity to rise, to forgive, and to redefine who we are. My story is far from over, and as I continue this long, arduous journey toward healing, I choose to embrace the truth with an open heart, ready to build a future where hope and resilience shine brighter than the shadows of the past.